My wife and I will probably never move back to the US, and it's not that life is so much better here. In fact, some things are both simultaneously better and worse. How can that be? That's what I want to talk about in this video. If you're new to the channel, my name is Rex. My wife and I are career teachers. We moved over to Europe in 2018 and we've lived both inside the EU and outside of it. And this channel is all about sharing the expat life. If you watch that video in the corner, you'll find a bunch of things that I prefer about living in Europe over the US. And one of them is food quality, but there are trade-offs. And so the first thing I would say is simultaneously better and worse in Europe is the food. Now I'll stand by, every European country I've been to I think has better food quality than the US. But the food is also seasonal, and that feels strange to an American. It's like, well, I could buy strawberries a month ago, but why are there no strawberries now? Well, it's just because strawberries are not in season. And the EU has fixed some of this. In Latvia, we were buying avocados year-round because they all came in from Spain. But some foods are truly seasonal, and there's a real trade-off to that. I really like being able to buy strawberries year-round, but I also appreciate the fact that my diet has to change with the seasons. There's something that just feels really holistic and nice about it. Another thing I prefer about food in Europe is the variety of foods. As you cross borders and go country to country to country, or even region to region, the food changes massively, and it's really cool and interesting. It can be frustrating, like it's really difficult to find places in Europe that appreciate spicy food. I mean, they really just don't get it, not the way Southeast Asians and Mexicans do. And that brings me to some of the things that I really appreciate about food in the US. Number one is convenience. Now, I do really appreciate the convenience of I can buy any food, anytime, whatever I want to buy, I can buy that food. In some ways, I think the amount of choice in the US is absolutely crazy, but in terms of foods, I really appreciate it. I like having 50 different kinds of Doritos that I can choose from, and I especially like having multiple types of jalapeno chips. Oh man, I miss jalapeno chips. What I really miss more is authentic Mexican food and real barbecue. You find really quality grilled meats all across Europe, but it's not the same as like down-home American barbecue, like a good brisket or a rack of ribs. And honestly, I haven't found really quality American barbecue anywhere in Europe. There are a handful of random restaurants where you can get pretty authentic Mexican food, and I've been pretty impressed by it. But even that, when I'm talking about it, it's like we found one restaurant in Belgrade that is serviceable. There's a restaurant in downtown middle of Bratislava that actually has really quality authentic Mexican food. There's a few taquerias in Warsaw that are decent. There's a place in Helsinki that you pay an arm and a leg, but they have really decent tacos. But just in describing this, you can tell it's really difficult to find authentic Mexican food. And the same can be true about Southeast Asian food. In Riga, there were a lot of Vietnamese restaurants, but in Seattle, we have a lot of really good Vietnamese restaurants. I never found one that passes my quality control in Latvia. Here in Belgrade, there's a lot of great food, but there is no quality Thai restaurant and there is no quality Vietnamese restaurant. So these are things I miss from the US. I feel like in any major city in the US, you can pick a cuisine and find an amazing restaurant. In Europe, that's often just not the case. Then again, in Europe, you can go to just about any restaurant and get really quality food, and that's also not really the case in the US. My second big bucket that I would say there's trade-offs between life in the US and Europe is travel opportunity. Now, the travel opportunities in Europe are amazing. And the first thing I would say is there's a massive advantage to living within the EU, or at least within the Schengen zone, that's very similar to the US, which is no borders. No borders is awesome. Crossing borders is no fun. Just a few weeks ago, my wife and I tried to take a road trip to Romania for a weekend. And it was the first time in all of our travels in Europe. We've probably driven across 25 countries. No, maybe actually it's significantly more than that. Anyway, going into Romania was the first time we were ever asked for a AAA international driver's license. And we just had to turn around and come home. We waited 4 hours at the border, and then we turn around and come home. Yeah, borders suck. And that's really nice. In the US, it's really nice when you're inside the Schengen zone. You can just travel anywhere and there's no worries. There's also big trade-offs. In Europe, it's amazing to cross into a new country and have different culture, different language, different architecture, just like brand new place. It's rad. But in the US, it's also just really, really convenient. So like you can take a flight from Seattle to Phoenix or to the Midwest or to the South or to Louisiana, and yeah, you get a totally different culture, and it's just a different accent, so you still have no problem speaking to everyone. In fact, it still kind of blows my mind that speaking just English and Spanish, I think I could travel the rest of my life in the Americas and never have a problem speaking to anyone. Well, here in Europe, I've also learned some serviceable Russian, and still, it's really hard to talk to people. And I feel like this is a really powerful combination of languages, like English, Spanish, and Russian. For traveling, I feel like you'll usually find someone that speaks one of those. And in the major cities, that's probably still true, but as soon as you get onto the countryside, it's kind of surprising how hard it can be to speak with people. So while I do love the travel opportunities and the varied cultures across Europe, the convenience of traveling in the Americas is pretty amazing. I also love hiking and mountaineering and getting out into the wild spaces. And I would say the culture of that type of trip is very different in the US and in Europe. So in the US, what I would just call camping, in Europe they call wild camping. And it's surprising how often in Europe, wild camping is both illegal and unregulated. So I talk to people all the time about this because I'm really excited about getting out and doing some real backpacking and camping. And what I've learned is in the mountains in the south of Serbia, I'm pretty sure it's illegal. And in Greece, I'm pretty sure it's illegal. But people do it all the time. And it's just totally unregulated and it's fine. You just leave no trace because morally that's what you should do. And no big deal, we all move on with our lives. What the culture in Europe is a lot more about is hiking guest house to guest house. And it is a lot more expensive, but it's also really convenient. I mean, it's really, really cool to have a really light pack because you basically just need a day pack with some clothes. And you just go guest house to guest house, you eat in the guest house, you sleep in the guest house, you can get some beers every single night, you can charge your cell phone every day, and it definitely makes for some very easy backpacking. But then again, it also means you're gonna see a bunch of people every day. Like, it's just not the same as a real backpacking trip in America. So really, honestly, I appreciate both, and I would just say there's a different culture about these travel opportunities in the US and Europe. Personally, I really prefer the varied cultures of Europe, but there's real advantages to the convenience in the Americas. My third big bucket of things that's not necessarily better or worse, but it's definitely very different in both places, is lifestyle. If you watch my video about the things that I really appreciate about living in Europe and honestly like better than living in the US, you'll hear me talk about the work-life balance. And I'll stand by that. I really like the way people view and live by a work-life balance here in Europe. But there's also cost to it. In order to highlight that cost, I'll tell a story. We were traveling with a bunch of family. We probably had a group of like 12 or 14 people in Budapest. It's like the middle of the day and we walk and we find this restaurant that's absolutely empty. And we look at the menu, it looks like pretty decent food. So of course we go and we ask the waitress like, hey, do you mind if we go ahead and push some tables together? We can all sit together. Like, your restaurant is empty. And I told her up front, and we'll tip. So as an American, as soon as I hear that, I'd probably be thinking, hold on, we've got like 12 or 14 people. This tip is gonna be significant. And I do know Europeans that are gonna hustle for that extra 30 or 40 euros or whatever it would end up being. But there's also the flip side, because this culture is not hustle culture. So this young girl was just like, no, I don't want to push together tables. You guys can't sit here. Honestly, I was really angry, and my family was nice and kind, and they pulled me along and we left and we went and found somewhere else. I just can't understand someone who has a job and refuses to do it. I could be totally wrong, but I think this is a girl who's just thinking, you know what? I could just sit here and play on my phone and make my hourly. I already have healthcare covered, like everything is good, life is fine. I don't need to hustle for this bit of extra money. So then, no, you can't, just move on. It's at this point, I'm not even like annoyed by it. I just literally don't understand. So there's a trade-off. And I do really love the look on work-life balance here in Europe. But there are times it frustrates me. And it just kind of keeps building on this theme where I would say like, things in Europe are often better, but life moves slower. And in the US, everything is convenient. And I do miss that convenience. It's really, really nice. But if you like this video, I think you might be interested in the things that I think are just better about life in the US than Europe. If that's true, check out the video right here on the end screen. Ciao, ciao.